ready to fight from within. You're about to go behind enemy lines.
Roger, 3-2. Goliath copies all. Go ahead. Target is surrounded by multiple firms entering what appears to be a residential area. Requesting permission to engage. Over.
From the People's Republic of New York City, you're now going behind enemy lines with Gene Baradelli and Russ Gallo.
And you are now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, America? Gene Baradelli here with you on another beautiful night here in the People's Republic of New York City. Glad you can join us tonight, wherever you are across our listening area, whether it be online or on terrestrial radio. Glad to have you with us. We're going to be talking about some controversial topics tonight, and it's a shame that my boy Russ Gallo can't be with us, because we're going to be talking about, yes, race relations in America. Specifically talking about in the context of the verdict of Officer Edward Nero in Baltimore. We're going to get into that. We're going to get a little wonky in some legal language, and I get to be a lawyer. It's going to be fun. Also, we'll be talking with Niger Innis from Tea Party Forward, the chairman of Tea Party Forward, about the Black Lives Matter movement, what he believes is in store for the RNC, and what he has planned instead. So let's get right into it, folks. For those of you who have not been following the news lately, while you're listening to the show, I don't know. I'm not a news station, but I do talk about the news. Let's talk about this verdict recently in the news this week out of Baltimore. One of the Freddie Gray trials, the trial of Officer Edward Nero. This week, verdict came back that Officer Nero is found not guilty after a bench trial of all counts. And this, in my opinion, as we'll see as we dissect the verdict, is justice. Let's get through a couple of the formalities right now. Officer Nero was charged with second-degree assault, reckless endangerment, and related counts of corruption and acts of official misconduct, I guess we'll call it. And he ended up having a bench trial. Bench trial means that there's no jury. It means that a judge is going to decide the case, and a judge by the name of Barry Williams ended up deciding this matter. And when you look at the evidence and you read the verdict, listen, I don't go by news reports. I don't go by analysis by other sites or legal minds or anything like that. I go right to the record. Went right to the court record, read the judge's full decision. For those of you who are looking for it yourself right now, you can find it on Scribd. If you go to Scribd.com, look up State of Maryland versus Edward Nero, you'll get the full transcript of Judge Williams' decision, all 25 pages of it, and you'll be able to read for yourself why the judge decided how he decided in this matter. And when you read these things, folks, understand that the justice system, when it works, is truly colorblind. Understand that Judge Barry Williams made a career as a prosecutor in going after corrupt cops. Understand that he was able to put his bias aside. Even if he had one, whether he did or not, I can't tell you, but everybody is human. Everyone has some sort of bias. Everyone has some sort of predeterminative cognitive things going on in their heads. Let's not kid ourselves. In this decision, the judge reasoned based upon the standards of the law as they exist today. And at the end of the day, as you'll see, if you read the decision as you listen to this, you will find that in the case of Officer Nero, there is zero, nada, zilch, bupkis, as they say right here in the People's Republic of New York City. Nothing at all, in the slightest, that connects Officer Nero to the arrest of Freddie Gray and the actions that happened subsequent. And by the way, folks, to date, this is trial number 2 now in the Freddie Gray series of trials against the 6 police officers. The first one being against Officer William Porter that resulted in a hung jury. Understand, to this day, there has been no evidence put forth in either trial showing any form of misconduct, any form of corruption, any intent to do harm by either of those 2 officers. Now, we're going to see at least 5 more trials now, because that hung jury, that mistrial, is going to be relitigated, presumably. So you're going to see 5 more of these. It's going to be playing on for a very long time. And as you'll see, when it came to Officer Nero, there is nothing here. Very quickly, let's go through what assault means in the state of Maryland. To be convicted of assault, the state has to prove that the defendant, in this case Officer Nero, committed some sort of offensive physical contact with the victim. The contact was intentional or reckless in nature, not accidental, and that it wasn't legally justified. Now you may ask, what is the extent of Officer Nero touching Freddie Gray? Officer Nero picked up his legs while another officer picked him up by the upper body to put him into the van. And that was it. And this state attorney, Marilyn Mosby, had the gall to charge him with an assault. I don't get it, folks. This, to me, is not legal reasoning. There's nothing unreasonable about a police officer, in his official capacity, lifting someone up into a van with the assistance of another officer, who, by the way, was his superior, as I understand it, and putting him into a vehicle. He didn't go into the vehicle to attempt to strap him in or anything like that. He didn't break any order to not strap him in or to do anything like that. He was in his official capacity as a police officer. You have to understand, folks, the police are human. They are allowed to make mistakes. So if you're saying that, well, he should have taken some sort of affirmative action to make sure that he was strapped in, even though he was ordered to do something else, understand that that's not intentional, reckless, or unlawful if he doesn't choose to do that. It's probably not within his training to do that. What's within his training is to follow orders from his superior officers, which he did. And I'm sure, you can read the judge's decision about the handbook and the directives and the standing orders that are there. But there is no standing order, regulation, rule, or law that Officer Nero broke when it came to this so-called assault. I don't even think we can call it that. By the way, folks, while I'm analyzing this right now, we have a chat room going on at www.BehindEnemyLinesRadio.us. Click on the Listen Live button, and you can check us out when we broadcast live Tuesdays on Spreaker at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Got a couple of comments in the chat room saying right now that Officer Nero may have a good lawsuit against the whole corrupt Baltimore City government. Well, I'm not so sure about that, because the decision to prosecute was by the state attorney, Marilyn Mosby, without input from Baltimore's mayor and reigning buffoon of the year here at Behind Enemy Lines, Stephanie Rawlings-Blake. I don't think that he has a case there so much. Maybe against the state of Maryland because of what can only be described as a novel way of trying to go after police officers. But we'll get into that in a little bit as well. Officer Nero was also charged with reckless endangerment and related misconduct. Now, for reckless endangerment in the state of Maryland, you have to prove that the defendant engaged in conduct that created a substantial risk of death or serious physical injury. Substantial risk being the key phrase here, folks. To do that for a police officer, you have to prove that they're a public officer. Easy enough. Duh, he is. That the defendant was acting in his official capacity. Well, we know that. He was on duty. And to allege and to prove that he failed to ensure the safety of Freddie Gray by failing to put his seatbelt on during the process. Guys, again, he was never in the vehicle. He was never in the vehicle. He wasn't anywhere near strap. He lifted someone's legs up and put him into a vehicle. Understand, folks, the evidence available to the state, they had videos. They had witnesses. They had all these things, and none of it pointed to any sort of colorable action here. Nero did not create any offensive or unwanted physical contact that was reckless or intentionally done and not legally justified. He's a police officer. There's a wide latitude there, folks. There's got to be something there that maybe I'm not seeing, but the judge didn't see it either. There was testimony presented. There were interviews done with the defendant. There was, deals made with other officers to give testimony here. The judge did his job well. He followed the letter of the law. I don't know what to tell anybody else here, but my goodness, what a miscarriage of justice it was to probably bring this case in the first place. The theory that the government was working under was that the officer had a legal duty to demand the actual arresting officer to tell him and explain to him the rationale for the stop before assisting. I'm sorry, but does anybody realize how police officers work? It's a very dangerous job. You don't have the time to say, well, officer, can you explain to me why you're doing this at this point? I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. You make decisions given the information you have with the best judgment you can use based upon your training and expertise. You can't stop and say, whoa, time out, hold up, wait a minute. I need to know exactly what's going on before I do anything else. That's how officers get killed. That's how officers get injured on the job. That's how families lose families. I am in no way saying that the procedures in place are adequate. I don't know what happened. I can't say that. There's been no evidence presented to me about this Officer Miller to say anything to me about what happened here. The state was arguing, okay, so going through the decision again, if I'm getting too wonky, chat room, let me know. But to be perfectly honest here, an example of how the officer here should never have been brought up on charges is in the papers brought by the state here. The state actually argued a theory called accomplice liability. For those of you who don't know what that means, that basically means conspiracy. It means people got together, agreed to do something illegal, and then acted in furtherance of that agreement. Yet, criminal conspiracy was not one of the charges brought against Officer Nero. How could you be an accomplice where there is no conspiracy even alleged? Again, I'm being a little incredulous here because as an attorney, these things don't add up. These things don't make sense. You have to prove in a conspiracy that a crime occurred, that the defendant had an intent to make it happen, and knowing that, aided in some way, or communicated that they were ready to support the furtherance of a crime. Where in the world does an officer arriving after an arrest has been made come in and say, yep, I'm all in on the conspiracy, boys. Here I am, I'm ready to go. Come on. It's absolutely ridiculous. Listen, folks, the bottom line here is this. We can go through all the legal analysis, but the judge rightly said, an officer similarly situated by Officer Nero, relying on other officers in the van with the detainee, whether or not he should have been seatbelted or not, is not unreasonable to do. He reasonably relied on other officers. That's what you do when you're a police officer. You rely on your brothers in arms. Officer Nero reasonably assumed and